concerned about like the green energy and those kind of things. If I was $1 billion company, I might be concerned about it, but we're pretty nimble. I mean, we've got less than 20 people, so we're very adaptable. I also spend a lot of time reading, and so I'm always looking at, Wayne Gretzky said, don't go where the puck is, go where it's going. And so I spend a lot of time thinking 6, 12, 24 months out. And so I really think hydrogen for us is going to be a big space. But the bottom line is we're not going to replace our energy. I mean, we're going to continue to have electricity. I mean, even if we move to electric cars, you're going to have natural gas transported. So at least in my career, you know, I've planned to work probably another 20 years. Y'all might have to be concerned about it, but I don't know. A lot of it's too good to be true. You know, it's like we're not going to replace the pipeline system anytime soon. Okay, so we'll get started. We're going to shift gears a little bit. Thing to work here. Of course, it would lock up. Okay, here we go. We didn't fall asleep, but the computer did. So you got a little schedule there in front of you, and we'll try to stay on it. I'm not going to be super crazy about it. It's just not changing. Okay, there we go. So we'll talk a little bit about the schedule here in a minute. I'm going to talk about mentors, something that's super important. Mentors can really help determine the direction. I'll talk a little bit about me, just kind of give you some background. We're going to do something kind of fun. I know this is the first time that y'all been able to get together. So Ashley's a live stream working? Okay, good. So do we have anybody on live stream? Cool. Well, hello, live stream friends. Sorry you can't be here. We will enjoy barbecue for you. I'm Chris Alexander, and I'm president of ADV. You're going to get to see me a lot today. Andrew, you want to come say hi to him? There you go. Yeah, you come up here.
Hey, y'all.
Yeah. Awkward moment. Yep.
It's good to see you.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, y'all.
So you're obviously engineers, but you're here to learn about business. So we're going to spend some time today talking about selling. And I really do, as I said when y'all first came in, I love this topic. I'm a voracious reader. Y'all are all going to get a book today. So I love to read. And I'm usually reading 3 or 4 books at a time. So these are a bunch of business books. I don't go home and read fractional mechanics books, okay? I go home and I read history books. I read business books. So I've got some of my favorite. Usually my mantra is I'll read a book and really like it, and then I buy 20 copies of it. And so at home and in my office upstairs, I've probably got 80 books. And so I give them away to my friends. I'm like, hey, I read this great book. So everybody knows that's kind of my deal. Everybody's got to have a deal. My wife likes fabric, and I like books. So some people, I like cars too. But anyway, so this kind of the schedule. So we've kind of done this. You know, we spend a little more time in the lab, but I want you to kind of see what we're doing. And, you know, I'm an engineer, but all of the stuff that we see here, it's business, right? It's driving business. It's meeting business needs. I'm gonna have you take a personality test. I don't know if you've done that before, but we're gonna take a little break and do that. Then we'll take a lunch break. The door prizes are books, so all of you get a book today. And then kind of this afternoon, we'll talk about selling, and I'm splitting up selling and business development. They're 2 different things because there are people who are really good at selling who can't run a business. And I know other people who can run a business, but they couldn't sell an ice cube to an Eskimo, okay? So sometimes as engineers, we tend to lump, you know, all the business people in the same category. Some of them don't like math, okay? And so they're probably not going to be accountants and finance people. The accountant and finance people probably don't like marketing. So we've got to be really careful, just like when they look at us, they're like, oh, you engineers are all the same. You know, a material science person is very different than a chemical engineer. So anyway, you need to develop an appreciation for people's disciplines. And then I got some career advice. I know I sound like an old guy, but I'm old enough to be your dad. So that's what dads do. So I talked about mentors. So last night we went to a wedding. A good friend of ours, and their son was an Aggie. I think the wife was an Aggie, and so we were in Bryan yesterday. And so I got home last night, and I was kind of putting a few slides together. So this gentleman, his name was Fred Wilson, and I love Fred. I get a little emotional just talking about him. So I met Fred in 1998, which is the same year that Ashley was born. And so, and some of you were born that year. So it was a good year. And so I met Fred, and he actually had a composite repair technology. And so he sent a bunch of little pipes that looked like scuba tanks. And so I blew them up. And so he came up to see me. And I was working for another consulting company at that time. And I said, Mr. Wilson, I said, I think you've got a really good technology. But I said, I think I can help you. And so he said, well, and he was from Kansas, but he sounded like he's from East Texas. He goes, well, Chris, how much is it going to cost? And so, I'm on the fly, you're talking about, liking numbers. And I'm like, well, Mr. Wilson, it's probably $250,000. I said, your competitor spent probably $6 or $7 million. He goes, man, that's a lot of money, but I really want to do this. Let's get going. So really, literally within like 3 or 4 months, this was January of 1998. I was like a kid in a candy shop. We're blowing stuff up and pressure cycling. So much so that by July of that year, we got on an airplane and we flew to the Office of Pipeline Safety. So I got a picture of me and him, and I was much younger then. And we're in front of the Office of Pipeline Safety, and I had transparencies. Rolling, you remember transparencies? Oh, yeah. So I had a stack of transparencies, and they had a projector. And so I do this little dog and pony show. And what Fred wanted from the Office of Pipeline Safety, because you ask about ASME and there's regulations, he wanted a letter. And at that time, Clock Spring was the only product that was being used to repair pipelines. He wanted a letter from them that said, Armor Plate is the best technology in the whole world. And what wound up happening, they said, we're not going to do that, but we're going to come out with some new regulations. So about 1.5 years later, they came out with regulations that really opened up the opportunity. So at that point, it wasn't just Clock Spring. There were a lot of other companies. So I've traveled all around the world with Fred. So this is us in China, and we had a blast. And I don't eat Chinese food, which made it even more entertaining. So I didn't lose like 50 pounds when we went over there, but we just had a good time. So one of the things about Fred was a salesman persona non grata. I've never met anybody who could walk into a room and he had all these stories. He had all these one-liners. Unfortunately, my kids have to hear all my dumb one-liners that I memorized from him. The other thing was he was a voracious reader. He had like an associate's degree. He didn't have the opportunity to go to college, but he read all of the time. And the reason he had a tremendous impact on my life is I don't think if God had brought Fred into my life, I would have ever loved business like I do. I don't think I would be where I am today if it hadn't been for Fred Wilson. And Fred and I went all over the world, and he loved to travel. I think, to be honest with you, one of the reasons he liked having a business is he made money, and we could travel to the Middle East. We could travel to Australia. And I just got to be the guy who went along with him, and he'd put me up in front of people, and I do technical presentations. So find some people in your life that are going to impact you. And sometimes you don't know. I mean, when I met Fred in 1998, I had no idea the impact he'd have on my life. But anyway, he was kind of like a dad to me. And I used to talk to him, and he loved to talk. So I got to tell you one story, and then I'll go on to the next one. So we went to China for the first time, and we flew all the way over. Anybody know how long it takes to get from Newark to Hong Kong? How long that flight is? 17 hours, exactly. Have you made that flight? Just a good guess, huh? So it's a really long way, okay? And so it's pretty expensive. The plane tickets are pretty expensive, especially business class. So when you start traveling, you got I call it steerage, so you got coach, and then you got business. And they used to have first class. Today, they just got business pretty much in coach. And so the tickets were about $5,000 or $6,000 a piece. Well, he had miles, so we flew over business class, and on the way back I got stuck by the window, okay, for 7. I don't think I even got up to go to the bathroom, just sat there the whole time. It was miserable. And so we get back and I get home. Well, about 3 months later, he called me. He said, well, the Chinese want us to come back, and because they want to start using our composite repair technology. And I said, I will go. I said, but you're going to pay for, and I had this kind of relationship. I said, you're going to pay for my business class ticket. He goes, business class ticket? How much is that? So I get on United. I said, it's $5,500. He goes, I'm not paying for that. He goes, I'll just go by myself. And I'm like, okay, Fred. So he hangs up, And so he calls the Chinese, and about 3.5 hours later, he called me and he said, well, the Chinese said, if I don't bring you, there's no point in me coming. So anyway, we always travel business class, so I guess he was just kind of being cheap. So we're flying, and I'm reading a book, and I always, anywhere I go, I've always got a book, and I'm literally reading Dave McCullough's 1776 book. So that's a great book. Fred talks all the time, even when you weren't listening, he's just talking. So I'm reading this, I'm trying to read. I'm like, yeah, And he goes, Chris, are you trying to read that book? I said, yes, sir. He goes, well, I paid for your expensive business class ticket. You're going to listen to my stories all the way to China. Do you understand me? Yes, sir. So just, was so fun. And just, as I said, your mentors really can change your life. And so anyway, one day I get to see Fred again. We'll have some good stories. So I love putting this photo. So this was literally, as I was putting this up, this is me 30 years ago in my blaze of glory. This is us last summer at Matt and Ashley's wedding. So the bottom line is a lot happens in 30 years. So that's a good reminder that life does change. So this is kind of my background. Obviously went to A&M. I'm actually a third generation Aggie. So my granddad was class of 1943 mechanical engineer. What was going on in 1943? World War II. So he went and worked in the aircraft industry. So when he got out of A&M, he went to go work for Consolidated, and they were building the B-24, which eventually became General Dynamics. So when he died in the 1980s, he was working on the F-16. So just thinking of his career, he went from a 4-engine bomber B-24 to a F-16 that we're still flying today. So he had an incredible career. So I grew up in that. Then Dad followed in his footsteps, and he was class of 1965, and he was a drum major. So I grew up, in this environment, and he wanted to be a professor. So I grew up in Bryan, and he taught mechanical engineering. And then it just seemed natural. I like math and science. The interesting thing is I'm different than my dad and my grandfather. I consider myself a good engineer, not great engineer. They were both really better engineers. I think a little bit more like a business person. So Tanya was 2 years behind me. That was not my girlfriend. It was girlfriend then, fiance. Now she's my wife. And so I love being in the Corps, but my grades weren't as good as they needed to be. And so I just wanted a couple years where I could not have to shine shoes and I could just study. So I stayed and got a master's. And so we moved to Houston in 93. And I liked school so much, I decided to go back. Now, I'm really glad I did that. I do encourage you, get out. If you want to go back to grad school, it's difficult because once you start making money and you have a family, it's really, Kira knows about that. She's in school right now. Once you get a family, it's not easy to do. But I drove back and forth from Cypress to College Station. It only took 10 years, okay? But I eventually got a PhD. You know what I got my PhD in? Composite repair technology. And so I can make a little graph of the composite repair work. And so I graduated in 2007. So I could have been a professor, okay? So I was an old PhD student. But when I finished, if you make a plot of the consulting work that we did in composite repairs, it just skyrocketed. So if you go to graduate school, it's like I've talked to Matt, get a degree, especially as an engineer, in something that you can build your career on. And literally for me, it's probably, and I haven't made all this, but it's probably $15 to $20 million since I finished my PhD 15 years ago involving composite repair technology. So anyway, it's kind of an ideal story. Started working in 93, went to work for a company that was started by a bunch of Aggies in the early 70s. I've traveled a lot. We grew up in Bryan, and we traveled some, but I really wanted to travel, and I've been able to do that. That's why I'm ready for us to kind of get back to normalcy. Usually I'm traveling every 3 weeks. And in the past 14 months, I've gone to Tulsa. So anyway, I guess there's worse places to have to go. And a lot of what we do, and you saw the tour, we're tearing stuff up. We're bending it. We're breaking it. As we get bigger, we're going to buy more stuff to be able to allow us to do that. And then I started in 2017 in June, working out of my house for a year and a half. Scariest thing I have ever done. So Tanya stays home. Ashley was getting ready to go to A&M. The other two in private school that's more expensive than A&M. It was not an ideal time to start a business, but I spent a couple years praying about it. And, I felt like I was on the edge of a bridge with a bungee cord, and I just jumped. And looking back 3.5 years, it's been great. For the most part, I've had a lot of fun. So this is kind of how we started. So you see the building now. Back then, it was just an empty building. We didn't even have the insulation. So this is kind of how we started in January 2019. And then this is us today. And Matt flew his drone and got some drone footage for us. So as I said, I love when I pull up and there's a lot of old pipelines. So it's a little weird, but I'm going to go with it. So what I didn't have for you, because we've kind of cut everything up, is, this is it. I talked about it being strapped down, and then we blow it up. And then when it blows up, this is what it looks like. This is called a ductile fracture. Okay, so what happens is the steel stretches, and we probably had a little EDM notch in here, and we wind up rupturing the thing. So the goal when you have a composite repair is for the pipe to fail outside the repair. And most of the time, that's what happens. You've seen this. This is a 30-inch pipe. Remember, so I talked about, so these cylinders will push up to about 500,000 pounds each. And we put, this is George's technology, and did great. And where he mentioned earlier, we're trying to influence regulations. And so I had a call this last week with the regulators, trying to communicate to them that this technology is excellent. It works very well. One of the other little toys is we got the 3D printer that's actually in that room right now. So we actually made a little 3D model of this thing, because it started, y'all use SolidWorks? So all this stuff started as a SolidWorks model. So the beauty of it is you can send it to a fabricator and they make the real one, or you can send it to your 3D printer and it prints that out. So anyway, it's a neat little toy. We actually use that 3D printer to make a lot of fixtures. So out in the lab, the whole thing. So one of my goals eventually is to get into additive manufacturing, and they actually 3D print steel. And so I think we've actually done some tests for one of the companies on testing 3D printed steel, which is amazing. So we're getting ready to build a new building, and I'd love to have a wing on that building that we've got some additive manufacturing technology. So this was, I mentioned the box, we got down to -51. So when we opened the door up, that's what it looked like. And you can kind of see the whole setup. This is actually before we painted it. But you see the little rail system. So there's a lot of being an engineer is you kind of make stuff up. It's not like you can go to Google and go, hey, let's build a box that goes to -51. You got to test things. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And you just got to be patient going through it. And, you've seen this. We kind of talked about this. One of the things in that box, this one, I call it the honeycomb. So you pull this sheet off here and you can load 20 spoolable samples. So this whole bay was set up to be able to independently test 20 samples. So this is an outside project that we did. And so I love the drones, just the ability to we're a couple hundred feet up in the air. This is a technology that actually goes over the pipe and using a magnetic field that can measure the stress. It's called magnetotomography, and the Russians really kind of perfected it. There's a lot of technology that came out of the other side of the wall, so to speak. And there's 2 or 3 companies in the world that are basically developing this technology. So we took a golf cart and we built this little aluminum cart. It has to be aluminum. Anybody know why you'd have to use aluminum instead of steel? Exactly. It's non-ferrous, so it's non-magnetic. So that was a really big deal. So we had to get bolts. Everything here is aluminum, and it's far enough away. So the only magnetic field you generate is what's going on with this. So we displaced it. We had a hydraulic cylinder. We had pressure in it, and the golf cart ran over the pipe and basically measured the change in magnetism, which correlates to stress. So the idea behind this is if you had a pipeline that had displaced on the side of a hill due to geohazard movement, you could take this technology on a drone and you could fly over the pipe, and that drone would tell you what the stress in the pipe is. So we're not quite there yet, but man, that kind of technology, that gets me excited. But the other part of it too is they're going to need business people to help them understand how to market that technology. So as I said, when I started the thing, I was by myself. We've got about 20 people, and we've even got some people here that aren't in the photo. I like this slide because this kind of shows the world that we live in. We work with a lot of technology companies. We work with the technology users, which are the oil and gas companies, and we even work with the investors. So what you want to do in business is you want to find where the gaps are. Sometimes these companies don't talk well together. So our role is to basically mine that gap, so much so that we started an event called IDT Expo. We actually have an event June 4th here, and you guys are welcome to come. And we're opening up. It's primarily focused on inspection technologies. So back in its heyday before COVID, we'd have a couple hundred people and get them in a room. Now we're just going to get more tables and chairs and do it in this room. Okay, so you got a piece of paper. So I want you to get out page 2. So have y'all ever taken the DISC test? Really? I have. Okay, I know you have.
I think Buddy made me take it.
Yep. Okay, so what I want you to do, it's not, there's no right or wrong answer. There's no grading. We don't have to curve this exam. So this shouldn't take probably more about 5 minutes. So what I want you to do is you've got all these attributes. If that's an attribute that describes you as you go across, put a check by it, okay? So what you want to do is you want to have, as you go on rows, you want to have one check. You don't want to check everything, right? So on this first row, do you like authority, you enthusiastic, you sensitive, do you enjoy instruction? Of those, which describes you the most? So check one. You're all engineers and very smart business people. When you get down to the bottom, you add it up, and then you flip on the other side, and then you're going to graph it. So I'll give you about 5 minutes. I'll do it with you. And yeah, just one on each row, and then you sum the columns. anyway, you can go back next time. It'll kind of skew results a little bit. So everybody finished? Okay, so who are the high D's in the room? D's? Okay. How about high I's? How about high S's? Good. Any high C's? Okay, cool. So let's talk a little bit about what each one's means. Now, it's probably not very often you go to something like this and you see stuffed animals, so I'm not weird, but it just helps through the story. So in the animal kingdom, okay, there's 4 animals that represent the different personality types. So let's talk a little bit about the lion. So if you're a high D, I'm a high D, and when you think about the, you may not remember anything, but you're going to remember the stuffed animals, I can assure you. So in the animal kingdom, the lion's in charge. The lion likes to be in charge. Everybody likes for the lion to be in charge, because when the lion's not in charge, he's not happy, and it's better just to go along with him. A lot of the CEOs, President Trump would have been a good example of a lion, right? Just kind of, they're going to bite people's heads off. You better get out of their way. A lot of our society is driven by the lions. They're really important. Now, that's the upside. They get things done. The downside is the lions tend to run over people. And if you get too many lions in a room, you're going to have a war. And so if that's your personality type, that's a great attribute to have. You just have to learn that you got to balance it, because you've got other personality types. Percentage-wise, most of the population is not a high D, okay? Percentage-wise, a lot of the population is probably more on this side, okay? So I think this tends to be, my observation tends to be kind of the minor, because some of your engineers are going to tend to be stronger on this side. Now, Andrew was our only high I, and in the animal kingdom, okay, yeah, there you go. So we got 2. So y'all are the fun table, okay? So you want the I's at your parties. They're a blast. They keep everybody laughing. Most great salespeople. Fred was a high I off the charts, okay? They like having fun. If it's not fun, they don't want to do it. I married an otter. Tanya is super fun. It's actually the reason I married her. I was like, I'm kind of boring. I want to marry somebody who's more fun than I am. So they're a really important organization. The dark side of the otter is it's important to have fun, but sometimes you can't always have fun. And so that's part of the deal as well. But in organization, you got to protect the otters. I've been parts of organizations where if you get a bunch of engineers who are really serious and we're not going to have fun around here and those kind of things, you wind up running your otters off, and then you don't have any business because nobody's going to go out and sell. So anyway, I love the otters. I'm married to one, and I've actually kind of changed my personality a little bit over the past 30 years to have a lot more otter. So salespeople tend to be otters. Who are our steadies? Okay. Our steadies are the golden retrievers, okay? You need them. They keep the peace in the organization. My dad is a steady. When he was department head, his saying was, why can't we just all get along, okay? Everything needs to be lovely. People need to get along. You really need them in your organization, because if you don't have them, there's a lot of disruption. But they can tend to get run over at times as well. So super important. A lot of engineers will be steady, because you don't want wings falling off airplanes, right? They're very level-headed, and it was great. My dad, as I said, was a steady, and it was a great place. The home, there's just a lot of peace, and we got along. Okay, how about our conscientious? Okay, John, you're it. So I'm surprised we don't have more conscientious. If I had let you pick 2, okay, we probably would have had a lot higher on the S and the C. So what animal is this? It's the beaver, okay? So when I think about engineers in the animal kingdom, I think about a beaver, okay? Now, they're not good if you got property, because they're going to stop your water up and you got to shoot the poor little things. And they're really not that cute. They're actually kind of ugly. But anyway, this one's really cute, okay? So the beavers like structure. They like organization. They kind of get freaked out when it's not structured, okay? So they want things to be very orderly. So that's the upside. I love the beavers in organization. We have some in ours, okay, as an engineering company. They're very meticulous. They don't like making mistakes. And when you make a mistake, it bothers them, okay? So you can probably relate to that. And I think probably all of us as engineers, we have a little bit of that in us, because if we hadn't, we wouldn't have got through school. So the dark side, though, for the beaver is they get really kind of freaked out when they lose control. And so it's really important that the beaver understands that in order to work with everybody, you got to understand the drive is primarily concerned with getting things done. If it's right, it's okay, but we got to get stuff done. So your job in an organization is to make sure that these people don't drive cars off cliffs or wings don't fall off airplanes. So kind of what I figured out, and I actually did this the first time. There's a guy named Gary Smalley who passed away years ago, and he had a deal that was we did at church. And so he's the guy that did the animal thing. But what I began to realize is you have a dominant personality. And my theory is you were born with that personality. That's just kind of how you were hardwired. Your secondary personality is your environment. So for example, in our house, there were two boys. Y'all are too young to remember. There's a TV show called Leave It to Beaver. And so anybody see Leave It to Beaver? Google it when you go home tonight. It's great family entertainment for the 1950s and 60s. So our house was Leave It to Beaver. So I was Wally. I was the boring older brother. My brother Jonathan, who may be watching this, I sent him a link last night. Jonathan was the fun. He was the bead. He's a fun kid, always doing crazy stuff. And so our mother, okay, may be watching as well. My mother's very organized. I mean, Judy Alexander, man, she was structured. She literally counted our Legos as kids. She had, these were Legos back in the 70s when they were kind of new to the U.S. She had, I wish I had a diagram because I would frame the thing. But she would count our Legos, and about probably once a quarter. It just drove her nuts. They're all over the place. And we couldn't do that at our house because we probably have like 10,000 Legos, but we probably had like 300. And she'd count the number of blocks. So subconsciously in my mind, in Jonathan's mind, is structure is good. So I'm a lion. My brother is an otter. I mean, he is so fun. I mean, Uncle Jonathan, when he comes to town, our kids love him. Everybody loves Uncle Jonathan, okay? But our secondary personality, so I'm the lion, Jonathan's the otter. Our secondary personality is that organization, that beaver. So when you have children or you get married, you have the ability to influence. And as I said, Tanya's an otter. So Tanya's kind of helped me adjust my personality. So you can download this test. I think I got it on my website. It's super easy to take. It's great. I'm not saying you want to take it to a party. Hey, drink some beer and take the DISC test. Yeah. You may never be invited back, okay? But anyway, it's a great icebreaker, especially if you start leading teams. It's easy to take. It's easy to understand. Now, Ashley likes the Myers-Briggs test, which has got 16 different things. That's way too complicated, okay? I like 4. 16 is just way too complicated. So anyway, hopefully you learn a little bit about yourself. To be honest with you, your personality is going to kind of determine what direction you're going to go, okay? So, I mean, Andrew he's an otter, right? So he kind of came out. He likes people. And so it made natural sense for him. If you put him in a room full of engineers and he's doing calculus and getting exciting about running electronic stuff, he's like, I don't enjoy doing this. And the beauty of this test is there's no right or wrong answer, right? It's kind of how God wired you. It's how you're hardwired. The thing though is you got to manage your dysfunctions, because if you get in an environment where you need to be a little bit more fun loving, you're going to have to change, right? So anyway, the other thing is, and we don't have time to do this, but this is the only homework that you have. So there's this test called the 5 Voices. I wish that I had read this book 25 years ago, because I would have a lot better relationships with people that I don't have good relationships with right now. So I'm going to explain to you in about 3 minutes what the 5 Voices is. I have a good friend of mine who lives in South Carolina. I went out to see him, I guess it was about 3 years ago. And he explained this to me literally in about 3 minutes. And man, the light bulbs went off. So when you talk to people, so like when I talk to Kara, okay, so Kara hears a certain voice. I may want Kara to hear something, but it doesn't matter what I say. It matters what she hears. So we all have personality types. We all have a voice. So when you talk to people, you are going to likely have one of these voices. So I'm going to run through you which each of these are. So the first one is the pioneer. So the pioneer, probably in our personality profile, is the D. Okay. Once again, I think about President Trump. They kind of take the hill. They look back, and if there's anybody there with them, they don't care. They took the hill. So the pioneer is always out front. If you're in the Army and you're looking at different weapons, they're the rocket-propelled grenade. After they start talking, all you hear is poof. Bombs away. So they tend to be the great leaders, but they tend to run over people. So if you're a pioneer, when you talk, okay, you're projecting all this stuff. The pioneers in the room, they're tracking with you, but some of the other personality types are like, I can't stand this person. So you got to learn to balance it. The connector, okay, and our sales guys, this is our sales table. Roland, you're stuck in the middle of a couple of the sales guys, okay? So the connector is they know everybody. If you tell somebody that your foot hurts to a connector, they've already got 3 doctors lined up for you, okay? Is they know people. They can be a little frustrating at times because they're so well connected that they're going to focus on fixing you and helping you get connections, those kind of things. They are super important when you're building business, because in order to build business, you've got to have connections. But you have to understand, when you're talking to them, they're always thinking about connection. So I've got a good friend of mine, Tommy Preck. He looks like he sounds a little bit like Larry the Cable Guy. He's actually had 2 ladies in California. You know Tommy. A couple ladies in California approached him and thought he was Larry the Cable Guy, and he actually can go, "Get her done," and he sounds just like Larry. So sometimes when we have him here, I just have him do it and record it because it's funny. But he is a connector. He can walk in a room, and before the end of the night, he knows everybody, and he just has that natural ability. There's another friend of mine, Bobby Wright, who's the same way. They're wired to be connectors. The other one is the guardian. And I really want y'all to take this test. It doesn't take very long. The guardian, as the name implies, they keep their cards close to their vest. A lot of engineers are guardians. They tend to not be very trusting. And so the 2 groups of people, and this, if I had read this book and this light bulb went off for me, I finally understood it. I'm a pioneer connector and a creative. I struggle with guardians at times because they're very hesitant to jump. I'm like, let's jump and we'll figure it out on the way down, okay? But a guardian's like, wait a second, jumping, we might die here, and I'm on the way down. Well, too bad, okay? So, but you need the guardians once again, okay? So kind of like our beavers, they keep wings falling off airplanes. But if your organization is dominated by guardians, you'll never do anything. So very important voice, but you got to kind of balance. So if you're a guardian, and my guess is you're going to take this as, I'm not downplaying it. Y'all are very important in society, but you've got to learn to balance that, because unintentionally you're a tremendous discouragement to other people. So anyway, that's kind of my experience. Now creative, when I think about creative, I think about Steve Jobs. God bless his soul. He saw stuff we didn't see. I mean, remember when the phone, y'all don't know because y'all are younger, but when the iPhone came out, my wife and I are like, why in the world would you want to have a phone on your camera? That's the dumbest idea. What's texting? Why would I want to have music on my phone? I mean, when I misplace my phone, it's worse than my car keys, okay? Because I got another set of car keys. I don't have 2 iPhones sitting around the house. I mean, this is like my life, okay? And it's a bad day. I have to call Ashley and Matt. My phone's not working, okay? Our IT support. But Steve Jobs saw stuff other people didn't. We need those people in society. Insane asylums are filled with creative people. I mean, it's in all morbidity, they tend to be very frustrated. A lot of the great musicians, I'm a piano player, a lot of Mozart and Beethoven, they were very frustrated people because they move at a different speed. They see things other people don't. Super important in an organization. You need them because they're going to, your question about where are we going, Zoe, with the energy industry, the creatives, Elon Musk probably today is the most widely recognized creative, okay? Is that he just sees other things. He has the ability. He's obviously also a pioneer and a connector because he's able to convince people, even his crazy ideas, that are good ideas. So the last one is the nurturer. According to this book, 74% of women have nurture as one of their voices, okay? And so kind of in the, if you're going back to the Army analogy, the medic is the nurturer, okay? So sometimes the pioneer will run right over the nurturer, and the nurturer's got their feelings hurt. Pioneer's like, that's just how I talk. I'm sorry. So as you start your career, and some of you, what's the old joke? What do you call an Aggie in 5 years? Do they still tell that joke?
Boss.
Yeah, boss, okay? And I'll be honest with you, it's usually true. Most Aggies I've worked with, the other company I used to, you could take a group of Aggies and you put them in. There's just something in our DNA that we tend to be servant leaders. But as you begin to lead, if you lead people, this would be a great, if you do, I like annual retreats. So we do at least once a year. We get everybody together and we do these kind of things. This is a great test for people to begin to learn work well together. Does that make sense? I know I feel like a fire hydrant here. Any questions on the personality type or the 5 voices? Okay. Anybody?
So you have 3 voices? Each person has
Yeah, some people will have a dominant. I just have kind of three. Probably Pioneer's my biggest one. So yeah, take the test. I think it's different. It's kind of different combinations, but you'll have one that kind of dominates, and then probably depending on your personality and your upbringing, you may have two or three. So, well, let's take a break. Matt, thanks for going to get food for us. So we got barbecue, and for those of you who don't eat meat, we've got salads for you. So I think there were three that ordered salads. So if you ordered salad, eat it. If you didn't, don't eat it. And we've got soft drinks and water, and then there's iced tea. And so anyway, make yourself at home. Okay, we're back. Ashley, are we live streaming? Hello, live stream friends. Hope you enjoyed your peanut butter sandwich and leftover pizza, because that's what I'm eating at our house today. Although when I finish here, I'm going home to mow the yard, which is one of my favorite things to do. We have about an acre and a half, and I get on my ZTR, and I have lawnmower epiphanies and think of business ideas, and I'm by myself. So anyway, it's not a bad thing. Even when it's 100 degrees, I don't mind mowing the yard. So we've had lunch. So you all got books, and I visited with some of you, and I think just kind of talking to you and just kind of listening to you. I think they're books that you'll like. As I said, I love books. So when we built our house, we live in Magnolia, and we started the Blank Piece Paper, and it's a super fun house. A lot of guys build their houses around their garages because I like working on cars, and I do like cars. I don't like to work on them. But we built our house around my study because I love to read. And so we're moving in, and I probably got, I don't know, ask me how many books you think I got, maybe six or 700 books. So anyway, we boxed a lot of them up, and we're moving from our house in Cyprus. And so we're lugging these books up, and, Ashley is being the dutiful daughter and helping me. And she said, Daddy, when you die, we're going to have to get rid of all these books. So I was like, yeah, it won't be my problem. So, 600 books. Yeah. It's going to be your problem. So I bequeath you my library. So maybe Matt will appreciate it. So you take my dad's old Timoshenko books or something. So this afternoon, we're going to talk about two things. I've done a lot of talking. What I want to do now is I'm going to kind of ask you questions. Okay. So I don't know how much this week you've had interaction. I know y'all been virtual. But I want to talk about selling versus business development. So kind of before we get going, I'll tell you a little bit about my story. So I talked to you, I left the company I was with for about 24 years, and I started ADV. Super scary. Tanya, very supportive wife. If you start a company and you're married, it's kind of it's not a you do it, it's a we do it. And so we got into it. And so I worked at a house for a year and a half. I really like people, and it was really lonely. And I'd go see clients and all those kind of things, but it wasn't the same. And kind of my observation to be successful, certainly in the consulting business, there's three things that you got to be good at. And to be honest with you, not just in consulting, in life in general, you got to be good technically. You need to know something. I mean, if you're going to get paid and you're going to have a job, you're going to get paid because you know something. The second thing is you can't do everything yourself. So you're going to have to get people who work with you and for you to get stuff done. So the thing is, with us having a large organization now, I can go to bed, and I know at least two of our guys that are probably still up, okay? And one of them stays up to about 5 o'clock in the morning every night. So I know when I'm asleep, he's working, right? And so the beauty of it is when you build organization, you've got people that can do stuff you can't. There's only so many hours a day. And then the third part, so think about it's a three-legged stool. So you have to have something you're good at. Yeah, Andrew and I talked about this. You have to have something that you're good at. You have to be able to lead and manage people. The third thing is you got to go out and see people and generate business. And if you can do all three of those things, that stool will stand up all day long. As soon as you lose one, it falls over. And so one of the books that I gave Andrew was called The E-Myth. And so he's holding it up. After you read that book, if you really want, drive out here to Waller, and I've got about 10 of them sitting on my shelf upstairs. The problem is most businesses go out of business in the first 5 years. Do y'all know that? You hear the statistics. So let me ask you this. Why do you think most people go out of business?
Don't have a good plan.
Don't have a good plan? That's a good one.
They never get the necessary investment.
Lack of, yeah. Actually, Tillman Fertitta book Zoe's got, he talks about the biggest problem companies have is undercapitalization. In 4 years, I didn't even know what a P&L or a balance sheet were. I do now. I've learned a lot about banking because we have a healthy debt. So that's exactly. So undercapitalization, not having a plan. What are some other reasons?
Is it kind of like the thing that we were talking about with you have like this really good set of skills, but you don't really know how to market them?
Exactly. Yeah. The inability to market your skills. And so the idea behind that E-myth, the entrepreneurial myth, is like you have someone that opens a bake shop. So we lived in a subdivision called Fairfield here in Cyprus, right about 10 minutes down the road. And there was a lady in our neighborhood that she loved to bake cakes. And the kids' birthday parties, that was like her thing. So she opened a shop up, It was a nightmare, right? She thought, well, how hard can it be? And so she's got rent. She can't do all the work. She's got to hire employees. She's got taxes. She's got insurance. So once you get into it, and to sell a cake for even $25, by the time you're making like $1 an hour. So after about 4 or 5 years, she just folded the shop up, and just wasn't there anymore. So I think those are some of the major reasons. All of those 3 ideas, if any one of those is not there, the business falls apart. So, and then last year was COVID, right? It was a nightmare. I mean, this time last year, I was still in panic mode. It's like, are they going to shut all? I mean, the price of oil went negative. I mean, we were talking about that during lunch. That didn't even make sense. So in business, there's so many different things, so many variables. What's been fun for me, though, so for a year and a half I was by myself, is we started hiring people. There's some personality challenges and all those kind of things. But as we begin to gel and form a group, it really has become a lot more fun because we've got a group of people that are really good at figuring stuff out. And so what it's allowed me to do is I'm not just the one writing the reports, I'm reviewing the reports, and I've got some of our really smart engineers, but it allows me to go out and focus on business development. So I feel like from a trajectory standpoint, we've grown about 40% every year. And so even last year, we grew 40%. I feel like we're going to continue to do this. So we sat down at the beginning of the year. George talked about having a strategy. I'm a big planner. I mean, when I was in the core at A&M, I had goals. I had charts. When I got out of A&M, I literally had my whole life mapped. I'm a journaler. And I found a piece of paper in a journal that I had done about 15 years ago. I literally had where I was going to be financially. I planned to run for office. I was going to be governor by this point. Apparently that hadn't worked out, which is okay. So I had all these plans. But what I've learned is even the process of setting goals and plans, even if you don't accomplish them, you figure out, it's like, I really didn't want to do that anyway. So what we did was we sat down in January. And what I realized for me to grow ADV is we've got to develop people. So we've got to develop the younger engineers. And so we've got some superstars. Chance to Know is the first engineer. I mentioned him earlier. He's doing a great job. So we set a goal for him. We're a third through the year. He's about 60% through his financial goal this year. So I sent him all email last week and I said, this is where you are, charted it all out. But we set a goal at the beginning of the year. And so we had that goal, called that the target. And then we had a stretch goal, which was growing about 40%. I'll be honest with you, I think we're going to hit the stretch goal. But if we had not sat down and set that goal, we would know where we are. So the key is an organization, you need someone who's a visionary, but you need someone who has an idea how we're going to get there. So let's talk a little bit about selling. So I know y'all know probably the difference between strategy. Let's ask our marketing people. What's the difference between strategy and tactics? Yeah. No, they're good. Exactly. Yeah. So kind of strategies, the overarching goal, like we're going to win the war. Okay. So when Patton was general, we're going to win the war. Okay. And the tactic is, this is how we're going to win this battle. Okay. We're going to send our tanks and Rommel's going to be doing his thing. So it's very, very practical. In some regards, selling is the tactics in business development. So this next slide, as I highlight, these are not rhetorical. Okay. I'm going to ask you, and I want you to, I want some feedback from you. So what makes a great salesperson other than they're an otter and they're fun to be around? So you've all bought cars and
Able to communicate.
good communicator, good communication skills. Or some,
Knows what they're talking about.
yeah, they're not blowing smoke. And usually you can figure out if they know what they're talking about, right?
Helps you solve a problem.
Yep. Helps you solve a problem, and they're focused on helping you solve your problem, not their problem, the fact that they're not making enough money, right? They're focused on you. What are some other attributes that make a great salesperson?
I think where someone's a little bit blistered.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You know what's the old saying? God gave you two ears and one mouth for a reason. The challenge for really good salespeople, though, is they like to do what? They like to talk, and they're good at talking, right? I mean, they can just stand up and talk, and they don't have to have anything really to talk about and just flap their gums. They're entertaining, okay? I mean, nothing against our former president, but he was unbelievable at that. I mean, he could just stand up and talk, and he'd go from one subject to another, and you know, he was entertaining. Sometimes it's like, I can't believe this guy's our president. But he was really good at that, right? Anything else? What makes a great salesperson? We forgot one of the most important things, what makes a good salesperson. What makes a really good salesperson? They can sell. Yeah, right? Have y'all seen Boss Baby? Anybody seen that movie, Boss Baby? So Alec Baldwin, okay, your second homework, you got 5 voices and then go see Boss Baby. So anyway, it's great. It's a really cute movie. Alec Baldwin plays this little baby who's really a grown man inside a baby's body. So anyway, he's a wheeler and a dealer. And so there's a little baby who's a real baby and he wants to eat a cookie. And so he goes, cookies are for closers, okay? Good salespeople close deals. And if you have like 10 salespeople and you're a manager, you're usually going to have 2 or 3 superstars. You're going to have a couple of duds, okay, that probably need to be doing something else. And then you're going to have 6 or so in the middle, if my math's right. So if you're sales manager, usually what happens, and Marcus Buckingham talks about this in that book, is an average manager will talk about that you need to help the bottom feeders, okay? You need to help these guys. And sometimes even our education system, it's like we got these kids down here that little Johnny can't read and little Johnny can't add. We're going to help him. Look, don't focus on little Johnny because all you're going to do is pull everybody else down. Focus on the superstars, and then these 6 in the middle, they'll wake up and go, man, if I don't want to get fired, I need to levitate toward where these guys are. So great salespeople close deals, okay? What makes selling difficult? And I'm sure all of you have sold something at some point. When I was a kid, I couldn't stand selling stuff. I was in Cub Scouts, and we had to go door to door and sell current cards. I could not stand. I didn't like selling. And my mom, I think my mom's actually watching this today. We were laughing a couple of weeks ago, and she said, I never envisioned when you were a little boy that you actually loved to sell. What makes selling difficult? This should be easy, because if you've had to do it, what's that? Customers. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, life would be great if it wasn't for customers, right? Right. Yeah, you got somebody, you may be really high energy and you go in to see Eeyore, right? So if you're a Disney Winnie the Pooh, if you're a Tigger, okay, and you're a bouncer and you go into selling Eeyore, okay, that's not a lot of fun. Other reasons selling is difficult. There's one I'm thinking that I'm sure somebody else is as well. What makes sales hard?
Maybe if you feel like your product can't really solve their needs as much as it should.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe you feel like you're selling something that isn't quite as good as what they need. And it's really hard to sell stuff you don't believe in. I think we probably all had to do that at some point.
You don't like it. You're just not a salesperson.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Sometimes what's the Peter principle? People are promoted to their highest level of incompetence. And some people just aren't very good at selling. You know, they don't want to do it. And to be really honest, engineers struggle, right? Engineers, we tend to overthink things. Sometimes you just say, you know what? I've got 70% of the answer. We'll figure it out after we jump off the cliff. Okay, I'm thinking of one. Y'all hadn't, so let's do some ESP here. So what's one of the reasons that selling is so difficult? Yeah, kind of listening to what they need. Yeah, if they want to buy a driver and all you're doing is selling putters, right? You know, you got to figure out what that connection is. You know what I think the hardest part of selling is? Fear of rejection, right? So if you think about it, if you came to work here and I'm like, here's the deal. I said, I'll give you $150,000 a year if you go sell $1 million in business. Okay. Now, if I did the first part of the sentence, like I'll pay you $150,000 a year, there's probably not too many people in this room who go, hey, that's great. But the end of the sentence is if you sell $1 million a year. Well, you got me at the end of the sentence, right? After the comma, you lost me. So the hard part in selling is there's always a potential to get rejected. But kind of to your point, if you do a good job listening to people and you figure out what they really want and you've got what they need, at that point, you're not even selling. You're just connecting the dots. How about what's the purpose of sales? Drive business. Yeah, put money in the bank account. Or some other things. I can think of probably 4 or 5. I think that's the number one.
Probably like build connections with customers.
Very good. Yeah, you build connections. You know, the thing about it is you start small, right? So when I'm working out of my house, 3.5 years ago, got that first phone call. It was $15,000. I was elated. I was like, okay, we're starting. Okay, we're getting this thing going. Then there's the next project and those kind of things. So sometimes it's just kind of starting to build that base. What are some other reasons that you sell?
Solve problems.
Solve problems? Yep. Yeah, and that's a really good place to be. If you get to the point, and that's kind of where we are. I mean, we have somebody that calls almost every day, says, I've got this problem. And we'll talk about here in a minute. Sometimes you can't solve that problem, but if you're a connector, right, you know someone that can solve that problem. And so if you just become a conduit for people, you help build a stronger connection. What are some other reasons? I'm thinking 2 or 3 more. What are some other reasons that why you would go sell things?
It's a stretch, but spur innovation.
Yeah, that's good. Actually kind of what I was thinking. So like we were talking at lunch, Glenn asked me, she said, what are some things you want to buy? So it's always a good question. If you ask my wife that question, she's not thinking the same way that I am. That we all have things we want to buy. So here's kind of what's on my mind right now. So we leased this building. It's been a really nice building. It's kind of like your starter house. Okay, we're not going to build a family here. Okay, this has been a good starter house. So for about a past 1.5 years, I've been looking for land. So looked out here. We live in Magnolia. So I guess probably about 6 months ago, Aaron, who's our 12-year-old, he and I on Saturday loaded up my little hot rod and we're going to go eat a hamburger. And for the first time, I noticed there was a business park literally across the street from our subdivision. I was like, Aaron, take a picture of that. So I got home, got on the internet. Lo and behold, Tuesday, we're going to buy 7.5 acres in that little business park. So for the first time in my almost 30-year career in Houston, I'm not going to have a 30 or 45-minute commute. So I'm really excited about that. So the reason I tell that whole story is what's on my mind right now is the $3.5 to $4 million that it's going to cost to build this place. So a driver for me is I want to go out and sell stuff so we can pay our employees and get bonuses and those kind of things. But my goal by the end of the year is have a bunch of cash in the bank so I can just take it away from Uncle Sam and give it to our contractor and buy cranes. You know how much those cranes cost? Just take a guess.
That's a half a mil.
No, not quite that bad. Whew.
125?
Yeah, they're between 80 and 100,000 each. So I've got 2 of those. Okay, you can buy a lot of nice cars for $200,000. So it's that kind of stuff you don't think about. Air conditioning. Anybody have an idea how much air conditioning units for something this size cost?
45.
Nope. No, it was about 80,000. So it's about 80,000 to insulate and about 80,000 to put AC units. So unfortunately, it all costs money. And then electricity, it's actually not as bad. I'm just throwing numbers out here just to give you a sense. The numbers aren't as bad. Our electrical bill in the summer is probably about $4,000. Now, I was prepared for 10. So, Wendy Courtwright, who's our VP of operations, she kind of came upstairs and she said, here's our electrical bill. And when you're expecting this and you get this, you're fine. I think in her mind, she thought it was going to be like this. So she was like, here's 4,000. I was like, man, that's less than I thought it was going to be. But what's been really fun, and I hope some of you, I'm hoping at least 1 or 2 of you start a business or you join somebody and you build a business, is numbers to me that were very high when we first started, I don't even think about now. So a great example. So we got started. Wendy came over, Corey Duncan, who's built most of what you see here, and me, we met at my house, have a little back room. We do a lot of little strategy meetings. And so we're sitting there. And so Wendy had worked on a budget, and it's really funny now, but that day it was not funny. And so she's like, well, we need to get a copier and we probably should get a color copier. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm used to buying HP printers, and you go get a printer for $1,000. And the toner cartridges are $800, but you don't have to buy toner cartridges all the time. She said, well, I found a copier, we can lease it, and it's $500 a month. Well, I freaked out. $500 a month, you could buy a printer. And so anyway, she's a guardian and a nurturer, so she just shut down. And so I was like, okay, note to self, chill out a little bit. Today, $500, I don't even think about it, right? But before we moved in the building, that was a lot of money in my mind. So I think that's part of it too. If you're really driving business, it just makes things easier. My mentor, Fred Wilson, had a saying, and I hear it almost every day in my head: sales solves problems. there's almost no problem. And I've got one book left up here. And this guy said this. Actually, I don't know if you remember this. His statement was, there's almost no problem that money can't fix, right? If you need more equipment, if you got money, you buy it. If you need more smart employees, okay, like we're hiring, money will solve that. If you need to go buy land, money will solve that. But the problem is a lot of businesses don't think about making money. And so what happens is they get in these situations where they need it and they don't have enough coming in. So it's just like your house, right? The good news is you all have a budget. Some of you are going to get out of school. You're going to have to say, okay, how much am I making? How much am I spending? Am I saving? A business is exactly the same way. You just tend to have more zeros in a business than you have in your own life. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this. And I'm going to talk, but then I want to kind of have some interaction. So these are attributes of great salespeople. And what's interesting is when y'all were making your list, you had some of these things. So the first thing is a great listener. Is it hard to listen? Why is it hard to listen?
For me, it's like whenever the conversation's kind of boring or I'm not getting engaged in it,
Yep.
then it's kind of hard
Yeah.
to
Yep.
stay engaged.
Yep. Yeah, some people are just not very engaging, right? I'd like to listen to you, but you are so boring. Yeah, there's a restaurant in Tomball that makes really good chicken fried steak, and they've got all these little stickers and magnets and stuff. And had this lady from the 1950s, and she had an apron, and she said, "I'm not bossy. My ideas are just better than yours," right? So sometimes when you're in a conversation with people and you've got better ideas than they do, it's really hard to listen to them. Most people, we're better at talking than listening. Listening is a discipline. So that may be something, we probably all need to work on. What's the difference between empathy and sympathy?
Sympathy is like if somebody's feeling sad, you're like, oh, they're sad.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Empathy is like getting underneath that and being like, they're sad. Let's figure out why we're sad, and then we'll both build it up together.
That's exactly right. Yeah, a good example is like if someone has cancer, right? So I've, praise God, I've never had cancer. So if you came to me and you told me a part of your story was cancer, I've got some guys in my neighborhood Bible study, and they're cancer survivors. The best I can do with them is sympathize, right? Because I haven't ever really been through that. If I was a cancer survivor, man, we could really empathize together. So the problem is if you only have sympathy for people, you feel sorry for them. So I'll give you an example. And so Kara, maybe I won't put Kara on the spot. She could tell a story. But we have a lot of small technology companies that we work with. And since I've started the company, I've tried to consult with them, and they're not growing. And I look at what we're doing, we're growing. Part of the problem is they don't spend any money on marketing, right? And what they do, it's not money well spent. They're focused on, we want to develop our technology at the expense of not properly marketing it. So if I have sympathy for them, I'll feel sorry, I'm so sorry. But if I have empathy, I'm a little more stern and I say, you know what, you need to fix it. So I'll give you a great example. Anybody know who Zig Ziglar is? Okay, so your third homework, okay, so you got 5 voices, okay, the third homework that you have is Google Zig Ziglar, so Ziglar. So Zig passed away a few years ago. If you're our age, okay, Zig was a great motivational speaker, and we actually did Amway for about 6 months. So anyway, about 6 months. You know what's funny though? My takeaway from Amway is I read some really good books. So I got introduced to Zig Ziglar through Amway. So, and my mom and dad are probably listening to this, which is really funny. But Zig had a lot of great stories. So he told this story. He was probably the nation's top seller in a group called the Salad Master Corporation. So when I was a kid, they had Tupperware and they had Salad Master, and these people would come over to your house and they'd do a demo and they'd show you about these pots and pans and, grating machines and all kinds of stuff that was really cool in the 1970s. So anyway, Zig had got to the point where he was the top dog. Well, he had a guy who worked underneath him who was really struggling and he wasn't selling anything. And so Zig goes over to his house and he's sitting there. So he's sitting in the kitchen with this guy. And so he's sitting there and this guy's just bellyache. And he's like, my wife's sick. Our car broke. He has a long list of reasons that he's not selling anything. And so Zig's kind of looking around, and Zig looks over and he sees some pots and pans in this guy's cabinet. and they're not the salad master pots and pans. And so Zig's like, I'm really sorry. He said, you know what I think your problem is? And the guy's like, he's like, what do you think my problem is? He said, you're not selling because you're cooking at your own house with a competitive set of cookware. Now, to you and me, it seems like no big deal. He said, look, when you go out and you talk to someone and they're like, look, I'd like to buy from you, but little Johnny's sick or our car's broke, in the back of your mind, you're thinking the same thing because you hadn't even bought your own product. He said, I think your problem is you need to spend the money and you need to buy the products so that when you go out and you talk to people that you don't have sympathy, now you can have empathy and you can tell them why they need to buy the product. So Zig tells a story. He had the guy, now Zig didn't sell it to him. Okay, that'd be really good. So Zig had the guy fill his own order slip out. He bought all the, cookware that he needed. You know what happened? The guy turned it around. Because what happened was he went and when he sold to people, he said, look, you use this cooking ware. Now, I'll be really honest with you. I don't know that cooking ware is going to change your life, okay? But my guess is Zig was such a good salesman that he's like, your food's going to be healthier if you cook with our pots and pans. And he was probably so good people believed him. So that's super important because the problem is you can't really solve people's problem if you only have sympathy. Now, one of the things that y'all talked about was that they find solutions even if they're not the solution provider. So I had a guy call me this week, or actually sent me an email, said, hey, I'm having a problem with this. What are your thoughts? So my first thought is I wish we could help him, but we don't have the skill set in our organization to do it. I said, you know what? Here's what you need to do, and here's who you need to call. So he emailed me back, said, man, I can talk to you. And he said, you're going to always be able to help me, even if you can't make any money out of it. Because what happens is if you help enough people when they need something and you can provide that service to them, you're going to get that deal. So you may have to help people 9 or 10 times before you can actually close the deal. Extreme networker. So our Otter friends in the back here, okay, they're really good at networking. Why do you think that's important to be a good networker in sales? Yeah, exactly right. Yep. So I have a friend of mine, Mike Slavic. Mike is an Aggie. Mike started selling insurance for Northwestern Mutual. And I don't know the exact number, but I think when he got out of A&M, he started selling. I think they might have paid him like $12,000 a year. Not a lot of money. And they start him off really low. But the point is, if you're really successful, you can be very successful. So anyway, Mike is probably one of the top Northwestern Mutual salesmen in the United States. I mean, he's gotten awards year after year. But I've watched Mike. Mike is the ultimate networker. So what Mike would do is when we first started doing business together, he'd take me to lunch and he'd take a piece of paper and slide across the table. He'd say, hey, Chris, he said, obviously I've helped you, for you and Tanya, y'all got insurance, you got life insurance, you're comfortable with it. You can sleep at night because if something happens to you that your family's going to be taken care of. He said, you have 4 or 5 friends that you think might could benefit from what I'm doing for you. Well, he's bought me lunch. Okay, we go to church together. I like him and his family. Well, of course. So I give him 4 or 5 names. What would Mike do with those 4 or 5 names? He wouldn't just stick them in his briefcase and go home and play golf. He'd reach out to those people. He'd call them. So over a relatively short period of time, Mike did that with a lot of people. So the beauty of it, what Mike would do was, let's say he was going to call, Mark Hamilton. He'd say, hey, Mark, this is Mike Slavic. I'm friends with Chris Alexander. Chris is also a client. And Chris thought that you might benefit from some of the services that I'm providing for his family. What do you think Mark's going to do? Now, if Mark doesn't like me, he might hang up on the phone with Mike, okay? But I'm going to recommend people who are friends of mine. So to me, I watched him do that. And as I said, he's become one of the most successful networkers I know. Matter of fact, I've had him speak at our events because he's such a good networker. So that's something that takes a lot of work. I mean, Roland and I were talking about LinkedIn. So it's something like that Roland's the LinkedIn master, whisperer guru. There's some ways to build stronger networks through that. So I encourage you to do that. And I sound like an old guy when I say this, but you all have a lot of tools at your disposal that we didn't have when I was at A&M. I mean, the internet didn't even exist in 1991, I guess, unless it was in somebody's mind. So one thing about it is they're like a good salesperson is a treadmill with no off button. They're just always selling. And then the last thing is they are optimistic. So what does an optimist do? How do they view life?
They're always positive.
Always positive.
Find the silver lining.
You find the silver lining. Are any of you feel like you're optimist? Anybody feel like a pessimist? I want to admit it. So I'll tell this story. I know some of the people in the room have heard it, but it's a great story. So there was a couple who had twins. And so they were twin boys. And one of the boys was an optimist and the other boy was a pessimist. Regardless of what they did, the optimist was always going to be happy and the pessimist was always going to be complaining. So they went to go see a psychiatrist and said, look, the boys are 6 and, we're really concerned about the pessimist. It seems like he just drags the whole family down. No matter what we do, we go on vacations. He's just never happy. And the other one's always happy-go-lucky. Is there anything that you suggest that we could do? He said, well, I got an idea. And this was like in November. He said, I got an idea for Christmas. He said, what I want you to do, he said, I want you to give the pessimist a new bicycle and literally go out and get the best bicycle that you can find. And then to the optimist, I want you, he said, it's kind of gross. He said, but I want you to get a box and I want you to put some horse manure in it. And they're like, you serious? He said, yeah, you might want to box up the horse manure so it doesn't smell the Christmas tree up. So anyway, so sure enough, they took his advice. And so Christmas morning comes. And so the kids walk into the room. And so the pessimist walks in and he looks at the new bicycle and it's got his name on it. He's like, I can't believe you got me this. He said, I could fall. You didn't get me a helmet. I need knee pads. It's like, I wish this is not a good Christmas present. And the parents are like, you got to be kidding me. So here's the optimist. And they're like, well, let's see how this goes. So he starts to open it up. And he's like, man, it stinks. He's like, oh my goodness, it's poop. He's like, poop. He goes, with this much poop, there must be a pony around here somewhere. So the moral of the story is the optimist, no matter what circumstance you put a box of poop in front of them, they're going to look for the silver lining. So a good salesperson, because let's be honest, I know there's some people in here, I know George and I make our living selling. Do you sell every time? You close every deal? No. So what has to happen is at some point, if you're going to be in sales, you got to get tough skin. I mean, Karen and I talked about that. And you learn to not take it personally. So we were talking at lunch about, kind of my career. And so I started off at an engineering consulting company. And after about 7 years, it was 2000. And this is, y'all are probably, because you were little, you don't probably remember it. Some of you might not have been born. Around 2000, what was going on? I'll ask my older colleagues here. The .com industry is going, right? It was blowing and going. People were starting .com. So I left a successful engineering consulting company. I also become the next Mark Cuban. So I started this, company and I built websites. And the thing you got to realize in 2000, people, you go into a small company, they wouldn't even have a website, right? So it was a really attractive time to have a company. So I got going and got out there and started selling. In the first couple of months, everybody went to talk to. I was closing deals. But after about 4 or 5 months, I kind of had run out my list of friends and family. And now I'm getting on the cold calling list, and it's not going so well. And I remember about 6 months into it, waking up in the middle of the night going, what have I done? And I was like in a funk for like 2 weeks, listening to some Zig Ziglar tapes, got kind of motivated. And what I realized is sales is a matter of statistics, right? You may have to talk to 10 more people, and then you'll get work. Once you get some momentum and you get to be in your 50s and you know a lot of people, when you go sell, most of the time you're talking to someone who already wants to do business with you. But if you don't persevere those early years, you'll never get to be the benefactor. So any questions on that? So let's spend some time camping on this. So you're here and you've done this workshop. You've spent a lot of time with Andrew, and I know all the things that you've talked about. My guess is this is some of this. Are there some questions you've got about sales? Are there some of you that have your mindset, there's no way I would ever want to do that? Or some of you who are excited about it? Anybody not want to do sales? Okay to admit it. Was I was in your shoes, I would have said, that's the last thing in the world I want to do.
I went through a time where I didn't want to do sales at all when I first came to work with you. I told you anything but sales.
Yep.
Now that's what I do.
Yeah, that's true. And Kara had a very successful career before she came here, building a business that involved coatings, and so she had that experience. But what she experienced was that when you have one person in the organization that's selling, and other people aren't selling, all the pressure falls on that person. So it's like everybody jumps on the water. Nobody knows how to swim except for one person. Who's everybody going to pile on? The one person that can swim. So anyway, the good news is she came here and she realized that other people could sell too. Yeah. So everybody's selling, right? When you walked in here, okay, whether you know it or not, everybody looks at you. How do you carry yourself? Okay. Life, I've got a book at home called Life is a Presentation. Everything you do when you meet people, when you have conversations, you know, when you engage people, and the difference sometimes between a good meeting and a bad meeting is how you look people in the eye and do you look into their soul, you know? And there's some people that really have the ability to connect. I mean, that's the ultimate connector. Anybody really want to do sales? Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How much of your sales or finding new clients today is you going out and cold calling them kind of?
Yeah. Yeah. So questions about, you know, what in terms of selling, how much is cold calling? At this stage in my career, probably maybe 15 to 20% is new. And then the other percent is I'm just trying to grow existing relationships. There's another book, I hate to reference books. There's a guy named Harry Beckwith who wrote a book called Selling the Invisible. And I read it about 20 years ago. And so one of the things that he talks about is, and I don't know where he got this number, but everybody likes statistics. It's you're 7 times as likely to build business with existing customers as you are going out and getting new customers. So that's why we're probably not going to talk a lot about that today. When you get a customer, you need to do everything you can to take care of them. Because what that statistic says is if I lose that customer, I'm going to have to work 7 times as hard to replace them. So sometimes once you get a business going, if you just take care of people, right, the business will grow. But no amount of business development is going to offset bad service. So let's talk a little bit about service. I didn't plan to talk about that at all, but I think it's a good thing. When you go into a fast food restaurant, so I'm going to ask this question, I already know the answer. What's the best service that you get at a fast food restaurant? Chick-fil-A, right? What were you going to say?
Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A. It's almost, okay. Now, we're being recorded, but we're probably not going to get sued by anybody. So what's the worst experience that you've ever gotten or that you consistently get? McDonald's. Yeah, they were on my list. You know what's crazy, though? When I was a little boy, you know, in the 1970s, I mean, McDonald's and Burger King were kind of it, you know, and they really had good service. I mean, but what's happened is they've gotten older, and Chick-fil-A comes in and they've trained their staff. So I will admit, I don't think I've ever had a bad experience on Chick-fil-A. I mean, even when they mess your order up, you go in there, they're like, oh, we're so sorry. Versus you go into, you know, you kind of feel sorry even going in because it's like, I know y'all are busy. But then you go into other places, they're the one that messed the order up and they make you feel like you've messed up. So I think service is a big part of it. And obviously, Maze, y'all talk a lot about taking care of clients. So let's camp on this for a minute. Either in a business or a restaurant or something like that, what attributes surround good service? What's the difference? You know, what makes a good service experience versus a bad service experience? Attitude. Yep. Yeah, it's customer centric. You're always right. Attitude. Attitude is probably the most important one.
Make them feel like they got a good deal,
Even if you ripped them off.
It's true, though.
Yeah.
You give them that euphoric feeling.
Exactly.
Feel like it. Oh yeah. And they feel like they want.
Yep. Yeah, it's funny, you know, as an engineer, you know, we tend to be very logical. You know, we use that side of our brain. But when you buy things, what side of the brain are you using? It's very emotional, right? And so you like the people who do our marketing geniuses back here, they have the ability to manipulate your brain and the chemicals in your brain and get you excited about things. I mean, that's what Hollywood's been doing for years. New York's great at doing it. You know, they get you on the emotional experience. And so that's a lot of good service that make you feel valued. What are some other good attributes of a good service experience?
Fast service.
Fast. Yep. Exactly. Yeah, you're not having to wait. Yeah, I tend to not be very patient, as my family will tell you. And one time the girls were little. Anna was she might have been 2.5 or 3. Ashley was probably 5 or 6. And I do not like waiting. I don't, it's just part of my DNA. I'm very impatient. So we went to Wendy's, and a lot of times after a really long day, I'd load the girls up and we'd go to eat fast food so mommy could get a break. And I just loved being with them because the biggest deal for them was what colors they were going to color the little sheets at that night. So we're eating and I have to wait. And so they wanted Frosties. And it's like, can we have a Frosty? I'm like, sure. So I go up and get in line, and the wait staff that night was one sandwich short of a picnic. I'll just put it that way. They were not the brightest tools in the shed that night. And so there's like 4 or 5 people in front of me. I'm like, girls, let's just go get we'll go through the drive-thru. It's got to be faster. So we get in the drive-thru and it's not going fast. And so Anna, she's probably about 3, I can still see her little blue eyes and a little bow in her hair. And she looked at me, she goes, Daddy, you're not very patient. So anyway, that's been a long time ago, and she's a freshman in college now. But the thing is, we all have a certain level of impatience, and when it's exceeded, we get to a point of irritation. Now, there's people coming from other countries that don't have food, okay? So as spoiled American brats, okay, we have it, we want it our way, and we want it now. But the problem is, once you've established an expectation, it's very hard to let that down. Anything else on the service experience? I think it's good to talk about it, because when you're in sales, if you wind up doing that, you may not be the person doing the work, but you need to help these people understand if they don't do their job, it makes your job a lot harder. What's another thing that separates a good service experience from a bad? Atmosphere. Yeah, and restaurants probably are some of the best ones. What's the restaurant that we went to for Matt's? Luigi's. Have y'all been to Luigi's in College Station? So I'll give a plug for Luigi's. If you're live streaming, okay. Now the problem is you can't go for the next 2 weeks because we got graduation. But here in 2 weeks, Luigi's will stop going. But we went there. They had the accordion, the Italian music going. We walk in and we just had a great time. The atmosphere was awesome. I'm sure there's at least 1 or 2 restaurants in Bryan College Station right now where the atmosphere is not so, the ambiance is not so good. But it makes you, my wife even said, she goes, we need to come here on a date night. I mean, it's an hour from Magnolia. So there's not many restaurants. We probably wouldn't say that at McDonald's. Hey, we need to go here for a date night, okay? So the bottom line part of it in sandwich in between sales and business development is service. So even, as you look around here, I mean, obviously we're not making hamburgers or, chicken sandwiches, those kind of things. But it's really important when people walk in the door that they come in and then we make them feel welcome and that we're laughing. And I sit up in that room upstairs. So my office is there and there's a conference room, and I sit there, all day long when I'm not walking around. My idea of a good day is when I'm listening and the guys are out here laughing and the engineers are up front laughing and everybody's having a good time. When I go home at the end of the day, it's like, that's a good day. But if everybody's really quiet, it's not a good sign. It's kind of like kids, when the little boy's 2.5 and little Johnny's really quiet, he's probably sticking, toilet paper in the toilet, okay? So around here, I'm not saying they're doing that, okay? But when people are having fun, you can tell that environment. So when a client comes, okay, it needs to be something that's an enjoyable experience. So we have a client who's going to come see us, I think week after next from Alaska. Good friend of mine. We're going to take him out to dinner. We're going to make him feel very welcome so that when he gets on the plane and he goes back home, he's going to say, those guys at ADV know what they're doing. But you know what? I enjoyed my time with them. So at the end of the day, in business, there's a lot of tactical and strategic things in business. But at the end of the day, it boils down to one thing. It's those relationships. So whether you're blowing up pipe or you're serving chicken sandwiches, it's all about those relationships. Okay, so I like acronyms. I've got probably 1,000 acronyms I made up over the years. So this is one that I actually did with our guys last year. I found it. So to be great, we need to think great. And you can apply this to anything, but specifically in sales, you need goal-oriented. So George talked about you need a plan. So you need to set goals. You need to be well-read. Reading is one of those things, and I'll admit, when I was a kid, I didn't really like to read. It was like, okay, I'd rather do math and science, and my mom was always trying to get us to read more books. Now I've gone to the other side, and if I had 48 hours in a day, I would read for 24. I guarantee you. I mean, one of the challenges I have, and I love to work, but I don't have enough downtime where I can just read. But the beauty is, like, I could read this book, which I have, and I probably can get 5 to 10 ideas out of that book. that will help me build my business. So if I paid, let's say I paid $20 for this book, there's probably $10,000 worth of information that I can pull out of that book. So my encouragement is develop the ability to be a voracious reader. And the more you read, the more you learn, and then share that knowledge with other people. The other thing is enthusiasm. And I'll admit, to me, enthusiasm as a leader is one of the most important characteristics. And so when I first started, we moved in the building. I do not like Mondays. I mean, Wendy, we talk about it. I just walk in. I really like the weekends. And it's not that I don't like to work, but there's something about Mondays. I just walk in. But what I realized is I got to be really careful and not have a bad day, because as a leader, if you're not enthusiastic and stuff like that, everybody senses that. Last thing is accountability. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more here in a minute. And the last thing is time management. Do y'all consider yourself good time managers? My guess is you probably are. I think most of the people in this room, some of you are not shaking your heads. So some of you are better at it than others. My observation is it's really important to be good at managing your time. You don't have to live your whole life on a clock, but it's important to know where you're going, what you're doing, and when you're doing it. Okay, so this is a little deal that I put together, and I pulled all the clients' names off. So when we first started this, I actually hired a BD guy. And after 2 or 3 months, I told you earlier, I'm not very patient. And so I'm like, hey, how's it going? What are we doing? Have you sold anything? And after like 3 months, he hadn't sold anything. So we went to lunch. And I was like, okay, so tell me what's going on. What processes are you doing? Well, what I figured out was, number one, and I don't know why I even hired him, but he wasn't taking people out to lunch. This is before COVID. We could go to lunch, okay? He wasn't taking people to lunch. The other thing he wasn't doing is he wasn't sending any proposals out. So I came up with this CART, another one of my acronyms. It's just Client Assessment and Response Tool. So this is the first generation. Today, we literally sit down on Monday. We have a 10 o'clock meeting upstairs, and we have every week. And so we've got probably 30 projects we're working on right now. And so it allows us to monitor if we've sent proposals. If the proposals turn into active work, we make it A. If we got discussions, if we got meetings. So it's very color coded. So I can look at it and I can tell exactly what everybody's doing. So what it does is it creates a very high level of accountability in the organization so that we're following up. One of the things I've observed in sales is lack of follow-up results in failure to close deals. So if you send 10 proposals out and you just think that they wake up and they're going, hey, I know I owe Andrew some money. I think I'll just call him, okay? They're not going to do that. People are busy. They get busy with their lives. And it doesn't mean they don't care about you, but it's your job as the sales guy to follow up. So my observation with him was he didn't have any plan and he wasn't doing that kind of thing. So I started this. So anyway, it's part of the DNA of our company. And I really think it's helped drive a lot of what we're doing. It also creates a lot of accountability in the organization that, look, if it's your responsibility to write a proposal with that guy, are you following up? It's not enough just to send it. So anyway, I'm kind of a tyrant a little bit on this because I want to make sure that we're driving business. Okay, so remember I told you we're going to separate sales and business. So this is building business. So let's talk a little bit about this. We're back to the non-rhetorical. So I'm just going to ask questions and you're going to talk. So how is building business different than sales? Is it different?
Not necessarily, but it's the behind the scenes of sales.
Yeah. So what's the primary objective in sales?
Find customers.
Yeah, it's to sell, right? I mean, the primary objective, if you're a salesman, if you're going to be compensated, it's probably a percentage. If you're on commission, it's a percent of what you're selling. So your primary job is just to sell, right? If you run a business, what's your primary objective? Profit. It's a lot of other stuff too, right? Morale, right? If you're a president of a company and people aren't getting along, you better fix it, because if you don't, things are going to come apart. So a business owner has probably 10 to 15 things he's got to think about, right? So I think about, if my job was strictly sales, I've got one thing. I go take people to lunch. I find out what they need and I do proposals. I can do that all day long. I look at the role I've got right now. I've got to worry about payroll. We've got health insurance. We've got new insurance going up. We're buying land, so I got to close on that Tuesday. I got to make sure there's enough money in the bank so I don't bounce a check. I've got to talk to the builder. I've got to talk to the bank. Oh, we've also got 30 projects we're working on. So you see what I'm saying? So running a business, there's a lot more stuff involved in it than it is strictly in selling. Selling is very important, but if I don't take care of all the other stuff, I won't have anything to sell. So let's talk about what makes building a business difficult. So some of you've had family members who've had businesses. Some of you've worked for maybe smaller companies. So what makes building business difficult? This should be easy. It's a long list. Or maybe what makes companies go out of business. What's that?
There's a lot of variables to take into account.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of things that you don't have any control over, right? I mean, like last year was, even to some degree now, but it was a great example, right? I mean, imagine if you owned a hotel. Okay. I mean, you've invested your entire life savings in a hotel chain. In 2015, you made, $50 million and things are going great. You've expanded. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere comes this COVID thing and people can't travel, right? Tillman Fertitta, who owns Landry's, I think he had 40,000 employees before COVID. I don't know what it is. It's devastated his company, so he probably wouldn't write the same book right now. This is a pre-COVID write. Okay. So it's great. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts. What are some other things that make running a business difficult?
Running out of money.
Yep. Yeah, I told my wife after I've been doing this for a couple of years, I was like, running a business would be a lot easier if you didn't have to worry about money.
Sometimes it's discouraging and lonely.
It is. It is. Sometimes you feel like nobody likes you.
I think we added challenge of dealing with people.
Yep.
And you put a lot of pressure on yourself to manage.
Yeah.
Like you're only in charge of yourself, but
yep.
you influence a lot of people.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody this week, and we have sometimes we get along most of the time, but every now and then there's a little dysfunction. This person said to me, "It's not your responsibility to fix this." I was like, "It is my responsibility to fix it. I'm president of the company. It's my fundamental responsibility that we all get along. I have to fix it. I don't have the luxury of not doing it." Other reasons business is difficult. We probably could make a list of 100 things. We won't do that. Give me a couple more.
Selling things that aren't really on the market.
Yeah. We're selling stuff people don't really want anymore.
Not differentiating yourself enough.
Yep. Yeah, it's really interesting. Like we like pizza. So at the Alexander House, is it usually every Friday night we order Domino's. So the 12-year-old Aaron loves pizza. And so we got our little routine down. And I remember when Domino's kind of came on the scenes. Y'all ever watch the History Channel? I watch TV one night a week. It's Sunday night. And they got the kind of how we built America. And so they've had a series on the fast food. And so I really enjoyed the one on Pizza Hut and Domino's. And so I remember when Domino's came out and when I was in high school, they had the 30-minute guarantee. Now they don't do that anymore. But kind of what I figured out is, when you're in high school, you're not overly picky on the quality of food. You just want food. And so they were delivering marginal pizza, but it got to you in 30 minutes. I mean, I remember their pizza that had sausage. They put like 4 pieces of sausage on there. I'm like, what's the deal with that? But we ate it, okay? But they built a very successful business making marginal quality pizza, okay? Because they could guarantee that they get in there in 30 minutes or less. So that was their competitive advantage. Today, you got Papa John's, Pizza Hut, Domino's, and they've all had to do what? They've stepped their game up. Domino's, the reason Aaron likes Domino's pizza is he thinks it tastes good. So you got to be competitive advantage. What are 2 other things that make running a business difficult, specifically today?
All of the legal stuff and all of the codes. And
Oh yeah.
paperwork.
Yeah, Anna, I hate that part of business. It's all the legal stuff. We've got insurance, and insurance is expensive. And one of the challenges that we have when you work with some of the big oil companies is they want $10 million policies, right? A $10 million policy probably for our company is probably somewhere between $100,000 and $150,000 a year. So we have to decide, and we had one recently, we had to decide, is like, look, I told Wendy, is like, we're not going to do that. I'm not going to spend that much money when we have all these other clients. We've got 50 other clients who are completely content on a $2 or $3 million policy. So that's a hard part of it. There's also the fear of getting sued. Lawsuits, haven't been through that. It's a horrible experience. And you got lawyers, and there's that dark side of business that you do everything you can to minimize it, but it's part of it. And one of them is uncertainty, like in the oil and gas industry right now. It's been crazy. I mean, we talked about the price of oil going negative. The other thing that's difficult is, for some reason, our world seems to be almost anti-energy, anti-oil and gas. And we, if you do windmill farms, you do green energy, everybody's excited about it. But if you sit down on a piece of paper and you help people understand, I know you want your electric car, but do you know where power comes from? Yeah, I just plug it into the socket of the house. It's in the walls. Okay. Where do you think it comes from? I don't know. It just comes out of the wall. I mean, that's the mindset that we have in this country right now. So sometimes the absence of what I'll call intelligent thought is killing us. So to some degree, your generation's responsibility is to approach things. And I think it's good for us to be thinking about moving toward green energy, but we've got to do it in a logical process. And so that's a big part. I'm so glad we're in the pipeline industry, because we're going to continue to need pipelines, but the upstream industry has really struggled, okay, because the price of oil has been low. So let's talk about the third one. Why are some businesses more successful than others? Demand. Yeah. So give me an example. Give me a couple of companies that when they started, they just really took off, that they've really put. Amazon. Yeah. Now it's interesting, when Amazon first started, I remember in the early 90s when it started, I thought these guys are going to go out of business because they were selling books, but you can't even fathom today. I mean, Amazon controls the world, right? If you want to order everything from deodorant to, books to power washers. I mean, we order Amazon all the time. Almost every day I get home, and Karen and I are laughing about that. Almost every day you get home, and there's a box from Amazon. What did we order today? Sometimes I order stuff, and I'm like, what did I get? Like, I'm a trumpet player, so I play trumpet in the Aggie band. So Aaron started playing trumpet, so I've got my trumpet out and get my chops back. So one of the things I've always wanted is when I was at Aggie band, you have this big case. I've always wanted a nice little leather bag, And so anyway, so I ordered it like 2 weeks ago. And so I get home the other day, and there's this big box sitting on the front porch. I'm like, what the heck is that? I'm like, what did Tanya order? So anyway, then I opened it up. I was like, oh yeah, that's my leather trumpet bag. So anyway, it's bad when you order stuff and you don't remember it. What's up? Give me another couple businesses that really have really taken off. Netflix. Oh yeah. So another book to read is by Reed Hastings. Okay, have you read that book? Yep. And he talks about just kind of the history of how they got started, and they were competing with Blockbuster. I mean, is there one Blockbuster? We're talking about dinner the other night. There's one Blockbuster left in the country, And Reed Hastings, they went to them and said, look, we'd like to partner with you. And I guess it was in Dallas, and the guy's like, you little kids, y'all aren't going to last, and they put them out of business. I mean, and now they're making their own movies, So it's just, they've changed the game. The other one I thought about is Apple. I remember I was in 7th grade, and our 7th grade math teacher, Mr. Gelber in Bryan, Texas, had Apple IIc in the back. And so we'd go back there, and then we had 2 games. One was a lemonade stand, and the other one was Oregon Trail. So we'd go back there, and this was, Apple was just getting started. This was like 1980-ish. And I remember going home and telling Mom and Dad, I want to get an Apple. So we got to the Apple store, and my dad's like, we're not getting an Apple. So we wound up getting a Zenith. It wasn't the cool, it worked, but it wasn't an Apple. But it wasn't too long after that, Steve Jobs really got it figured out. And Apple's changed the world. In a relatively short period of time, they were $1 billion company. So as someone who's building a company, I have tremendous respect for people that can build an organization like that. So any other thoughts on why some companies are more successful than others? Yep. What did you say? Y'all said the same thing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Woo, in stereo. it's all about leadership, right? Success rises and falls, whether you're talking about presidents of companies, presidents of nations, it all falls on leadership. And to a certain extent, the role of the leader is to bring harmony in an organization, okay? But also to bring vision and a hope for a better tomorrow. And people will join, right? People will join you if you have a vision for where you're going. So I've got to kind of get toward the end here. So attributes of what makes great business owners. Number one, not afraid to take risks. And I'll provide this slide deck to you if y'all like it. Not afraid to fail. So this book, Black Box Thinking, is really good. And so what the guy, Matthew Syed, who wrote this book, he talks about that organizations that are willing to take risks and learn and make mistakes, they get better. A lot of organizations have paralysis by analysis. They're afraid to fail. So anyway, if you get a chance, you'll enjoy reading that book. Visionary, they're the creatives. They see things other people don't. This is a really important one. The difference between a manager and a leader a lot of times is their ability to put other people before themselves. And great leaders will do that. They see gaps in the marketplace. Y'all watch Shark Tank? We love Shark Tank. After a while, I know the first couple of years it was really exciting, so sometimes I get a little tired of it, but it's still a good show. But what you see is a lot of times entrepreneurs who come on to Shark Tank, they just see like the scrub daddy. What's the deal with scrub daddy? I mean, we've got one in our house. It's like, why couldn't I think of something like that, right? So there's some kind of little gap. And if you're an entrepreneur and you can see those gaps, you really can fill it. Leaders have to be, business owners who are leaders have to be able to build effective teams. You got to get people who are diverse, who don't think alike to be able to work together, problem solvers, and then they have never-ending optimism. Super, super important. Okay, so this is a book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Y'all read it? Have y'all had any exposure to it? I know the business people you have. Add this to your list. So this will be a summer reading book. This book's written by a gentleman named Patrick Lencioni. It's probably the best book I've ever read on how to build effective teams. Would you say the same thing, Andrew? I think bar none. It's awesome. So what he did in his brilliance, he identified there's basically 5 things that make companies dysfunctional. So I'm going to go from top to bottom, but we're going to camp on these 2. Inattention to results. They're not tightening the bolt, so to speak. Avoidance of accountability, lack of commitment, fear of conflict, and absence of trust. I think these 2 are the foundations for this. So let's talk about absence of trust. If you go to work, you don't trust your fellow employees, it's going to be very difficult for you to get stuff done. So for example, if I ask Atul Gampadye, who works with me, hey Atul, I need to have that report done by next Wednesday because we need to send it to the client on Thursday because we need to invoice them. If I don't trust Atul, it's going to be very hard for me to ask him to do that. Also, if he doesn't trust me, he's going to say, Chris is going to say that, but we'll probably send the report 3 weeks later. So that's very, very important that as employees, we trust our fellow employees, we trust each other. The other thing is conflict. Is conflict always bad? When is conflict good?
When it leads to new ideas.
Very good. Yeah, when it leads to new ideas, innovation. Maybe when someone's wrong, right? We're not always right. So that's one of the things that I've tried to build into our culture. I mean, even though I'm president and I'm the person who signs your paycheck, I can be wrong, right? And so I don't want to create a culture where people don't come to me and say their problems. So I think it was in Matthew's book, he talked about black box thinking. There was a period of time in the Korean airline industry when they had a lot of plane crashes. And so somehow they hired some Americans to come over there and study what was going on. So what they found out was in their culture, they had seniority. And so you had a senior pilot and then you had Roland, have you heard the story? So you had a junior pilot. So what would happen is the senior pilot would make a mistake, but out of respect for their seniors, they wouldn't say anything to them. So the pilot made an error and the junior guys over there go, well, I'm probably going to die, but I'm not going to say anything. Now probably if they knew they were going to die, they would have said something. But they had these errors, and so they built into their culture because I outrank you, you cannot correct me. And so what they did was they went over there and said, look, you've got to fix this in your system, right? It's great that you're the senior officer on the airplane, But if you're making mistakes and the junior officers can't correct you or tell you, excuse me, sir, can you look at this? You're all going to die. So once they identified that problem and they got rid of this fear of conflict, they stopped having plane crashes. So that book is great because he's got countless stories of things like that. So I guarantee you, once you start working, okay, now I would be very careful if you start working for a company and you're there for 6 months and you go to your boss and say, you know what, I think we need to read this book, okay? Maybe subtly give it to him because you want to be careful, say, hey, we're dysfunctional and it's your fault, okay? But at some point as you're leading an organization, it'd probably be a good idea to read through the book with your group. And I enjoy reading a book like that as a team because nobody's pointing any fingers and you're saying, look, we may not be dysfunctional, but we want to make sure that we don't become dysfunctional. It's another book. Our business friends, if y'all read this book, Good to Great, another good one. I'm giving y'all a lot of books to read this summer, the Alexander Reading Club. So he has this concept, and I'll admit it's a bit of a stretch, but it's called the hedgehog concept. And so the idea is the fox versus the hedgehog, that the fox is good at a lot of things. You know, maybe the fox is good at fighting off and is good at scavenging, getting food, and maybe building a nest or whatever foxes do. The hedgehog is kind of known, it curls up, right? That's just one thing. So the hedgehog concept is if you're going to be good, okay, if you're going to be is this a Venn diagram? So it's going to be the intersection of these three circles. There's three things you got to be good at. And I really do think this is genius. So the first thing is you got to find something you like to do, right? So if you met me and I gave you a lab tour, you'd pretty quickly conclude, Chris likes to blow stuff up, okay? I don't understand it, but he likes to tear stuff up. So he's passionate about pipelines. He's the only person I've ever in my life who gets excited about, 1940 pipeline material. It's kind of weird, but I am passionate about helping people in the pipeline industry. The other thing is, what can you be the best in the world at doing? So there was a professor of mechanical engineering. His name was Dr. Thompson, and he was there from probably the 1950s. I think he probably passed away in the 1970s. And most Aggies who are my dad's age, they all had Dr. Thompson. He was over ASME, and so everybody loved. Did you hear about Dr. Thompson, Roland?
Yeah.
Okay.
ASME, but
Yeah.
was a little before my
Yeah, he was before our time. And I had a little of advantage because I grew up there, so with Dad teaching. So anyway, Dr. Thompson told my dad, he said, Richard, he said, you need to find something in your life that you can be the very best in the world at. So I remember my dad telling me that when I was like 16. And so I just kind of tucked it away back in my mind. I think that is great advice. So there's probably something, and the beauty with social media and stuff, you can have an area where you develop some expertise that maybe you really write about. It's a lot easier to become a world-renowned expert today than it was 25 or 30 years ago. So find something where you can be the best at what you do. And then the last thing is you can make money. So I have a little joke. So I like books. My wife, Tanya, loves fabric. So if you come over to our house, we literally have 2 rooms that are her rooms. So she has one room where she has a long arm. She's into quilting. And then she has another room where she does her sewing. She's got a big screen TV. And so she's not downstairs. She lives up there. So my wife is deeply passionate about fabric. I mean, we have literally gone on vacations and we've gone to quilt stores and she's come back with a suitcase full of fabric. I don't understand it. She didn't understand my book thing. I understand her fabric thing. She is extremely good at sewing. I mean, just gifted, but she hadn't quite figured out how to make money. That's called a hobby, okay? So you don't want your business, okay? That's great, okay? It's like golf. I can be passionate, I can be pretty good at it, but I'm probably not going to beat Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson, okay? So you pull this out, that's called a hobby. In business, you got to push that thing in, and you got to figure out how to do it. Money's a funny thing, right? I mean, what's the 2 things that your mother told you to never talk about in public, okay? Yeah, it's usually 3 things. So it's religion, politics, and money. Remember Barbara Bush, that was her thing. She said, we don't talk about money more with people. It's kind of hard to run a business and not talk about money. The purpose of business is to drive revenue, right? So you've got to figure out how you can make money. You got to realize if you have competition. So if you're really good at doing something, what's going to happen? You're going to get competition, right? Because if you're really good at doing something and no one else is doing it, probably means nobody else wants it. But if you figure out how to do it, so like when you drive around town, it's the same in Bryan College Station, across the street from every Lowe's, relatively closely, what is there? There's a Home Depot, okay? Everywhere there's a CVS, there's a Walgreens, right? And you know what's funny? Somehow, when they open across the street, they don't put each other out of business. I really think they probably help each other. There's probably some great business case study that's looked at that. But the bottom line is, if you figure out how to make money in something, this is why the ideas that Zoe talked about a minute ago, innovation is so important, because if you're doing something, somebody else is going to compete. If you're not thinking of another idea, you're just going to have competition. What does competition do? Drives price down. It makes things that are very specialized a commodity, and it's hard to make money on commodity. So I love this hedgehog concept. So it's the kind of thing, memorize it, you know. You can impress your friends, you know, if you're sitting at dinner one night, it's like, hey, you know what's important to have in business? But as you're building business and you go work for companies, be cognizant of this. The other thing is, this is a great book, because Jim Collins, he's a Stanford professor. He spent a lot of time studying what makes good businesses, great businesses. A common thread, and we had it in Stereo a minute ago, is leaders. That great leaders are servants and they care about people. Okay, kind of wrapping things up. What time is it? Wow. The built-in clock. As a consultant, when you learn to build things on an hourly basis, you develop this very weird sense of time. So I went to lunch with a young man that's I've kind of mentored over the years, real good friend of mine. So we're sitting there eating hamburgers one day, and he's an Aggie as well, very sharp young man. And so we're kind of talking about a couple of concepts. And so this is one of the things that we spent time that lunch that day talking about, that in your career, there's 3 stages you can potentially go through. So sole contributor. So what happens is you go to school, you get a degree, you get out in the marketplace, you're going to have a boss, and he or she are going to ask you to do something. You know, say, Zoe, hey, I want you to run this calculation. We're going to buy this new pump. Tell me if it's got enough horsepower to pump the slurry from point A to point B. And here's the equation. So they're going to give you the basic things. They're going to expect you to do it. Over a period of time, if they ask you to do more and more stuff and you do a really good job, they're like, this person's pretty good. So that's the joke. What do you call Aggie in 5 years? That transition is, then they begin to put you in charge of other people. And so then at that point, that's when real fun starts, because when people who work underneath you mess up, you get blamed for it. So that's the joys of management, okay? So, but if you don't do a good job here, it's going to be difficult here. I'm confident all of you are, fine, upstanding citizens. You're going to get good degrees. You're going to transition into this point. So you're going to have people underneath you. And these books that I'm suggesting are probably going to mean a lot more to you, because you're going to start managing people. A certain percentage of you, and I think it's kind of like a pyramid, not everybody gets to this stage, but at some point, you're going to be a good manager of people, and they're going to promote you. Now, what's the Peter Principle? You're promoted to your highest level of incompetence. So just realize that's out there in your future. There's going to hit some point where you get to look forward to that, okay? That you're going to get to a point where I just can't do anymore. So some percentage of you'll get to the point where you're recognized as a good manager. The transition from here to here is really difficult, because vision is difficult, okay? Marcus Buckingham's written a lot of books, and he talks about the keys, and it's actually in that book, the keys to being great visionaries or be great leaders is, the one thing you need to know is that it's about vision. And so great leaders have a vision where things are going to go, and they have the ability to motivate people. So his point is, and it's a little bit discouraging, there's a debate whether leaders are born or they're made. And his point is that no amount of motivational speeches and all those things can create in people the ability to be great leaders. His point is you're born. So that's the one thing you need to know. So some of you in this room, statistically, you're visionaries. I am convinced, though, that you probably all have an ember of it in there. And if you read enough and you're around enough good people, that those things can potentially come out. So here's the 3 S's. So at some point in your career, you're going to want to walk into a room, okay, and you're going to want people to recognize who you are, And so when you walk in the room, they're going to say, okay, there's Roland. I know Roland understands how to help students get jobs. He knows what's going on, all those kind of things. Roland didn't wake up, in 1993, the year after he graduated from A&M, and he knows all these things, right? It's an accumulation of experience. So the bottom line is we all want stature, but in order to get there, I call this my 3 S's. First thing is you got to have some substance. So this is what you know. So early in your career as an engineer, you're going to need to be good at running calculations, understanding fundamental engineering principles. You got a certain style, and that's something you can kind of play with. You know, I early on, I liked talking. I just enjoyed being in front of people. I went to First Baptist Church Bryan, and when I was about 12 years old, they stuck me up in front of people and couldn't get me to shut up. So I just developed a natural, I was comfortable. I was a musician, so I got comfortable being in front of people. So my style is I like being with people and I like being in front. I like talking. So I managed to kind of take what I knew as an engineer combined with this to kind of build the stature. I had a gentleman I worked with years ago, very quiet, extremely good engineer. And when he walked in a room, he always did millions of dollars a year in consulting business, but his style was very different than mine, right? He was very good at what he did, but his style was, he was very quiet. And if you asked him to do something, you knew it was going to be done well. So there's different paths to getting stature, but fundamentally your stature is your credibility in the marketplace. So you're all in early stages of your career. Don't worry too much about stature, but if you do the right kinds of things, stature will naturally follow. Our birds are a little loud back there. Okay, so I'm kind of wrapping things up. I wrote a book. You can go look at it. I didn't write it to make any money. I have to give them all away. Have y'all read Be the Beans yet? That's okay. You're just like my family. Matt read it. Yeah, my family said, yeah, when you die, we'll read your book. So I got that going for me. Something to look forward to. So anyway, it's changed people's lives around the world. No. It's a fun little book. When I wrote it, one of my mentors, I gave it to him and he read it like the next night. You literally could read it in like 2 hours. He said, hey, I really enjoyed it. But as he was processing it with me, what I realized, it was kind of a therapy. I needed some therapy. So I kind of wrote about being an optimist. I've given all of them away. I need to order another round because if not, you would have all gotten copies of Be the Bean. But what it talks about is being an optimist. And so it's kind of it's like kind of a Patrick Lencioni book about being an optimist. It's kind of a feel-good little book. So kind of my suggestions, think about going to graduate school. And I borrowed this slide. I do a presentation to the ME 381. So I just pulled this slide in. Think about going to graduate school. It's not time wasted. You don't have to go to graduate school to be successful. So I don't want you to feel that, but it helps. And I know like at our company, everybody's got at least masters and PhDs. So just, that's part of it. This is a big one. The fact that you all are here indicates you're engaging the business side of your brain, which I think is great. As I said, when I was in your shoes 30 years ago, I wasn't even thinking about this. So y'all already way ahead of where I was at A&M. Build a strong network. Use LinkedIn. Meet people. Remember their names. And y'all have an advantage that we didn't have 30 years ago because of the social networking ability. We talked about this a lot early on. Find mentors. Find people you respect. I'll give another one. Find anti-mentors in your life as well. And so when I was a freshman in the Aggie band, we had a Captain Knight who was a ranger and was kind of a motivational speaker. And so he gave us some really good advice in 1987. He said, when you look at people who are leaders and there's things in their life that you don't like, don't make sure they're not present in your life, right? So if you got someone who's mad all the time and it bothers you, don't be mad all the time. Or if you have someone who talks down to people, or you have someone who is not very good at what they do technically, see those things that bother you and make sure that you don't have them in your own life. So anyway, I think that was great advice. The other thing is I said, and you also have parentheses, calculated risks, okay? I'm a little bit of a daredevil. I like to drive my car fast and those kind of things, but there's some things I cannot get over the bungee jump thing. Anybody here bungee jumped? Anybody? So y'all are like me. I cannot envision on the edge of a bridge falling. I mean, it scares me even to think about it. Okay. And my brother he's an airborne ranger. And so he jumped out of airplanes and stuff, which is almost the same thing. Actually, I think I'd rather do that, have a parachute than jump, because I guess there's too much of me that understands, loads on bungee cords that, what's the fatigue life of this little cord, So what's the saying? If the pain's big enough, if the mistake's big enough, the pain doesn't last very long. So, so anyway, there's certain level, and some of you are bigger risk takers than others, So I think that's a big part of life. And the last one, and I can't say that when I was at A&M I thought about this, but have fun. You know, you're going to get to the end of your life, and if all you've done's worked and you've made money, and then you're going to buy, 20 acres near Palestine, Texas, and you're going to retire and have some cows, I just don't think that's great. I think you need to try to have fun. Life's too short, and I'll be really honest. I learned that from my wife. If it's not fun, she does not want to do it. So anyway, pretty much around our house, most things are fun. Okay, that's it. I think we're probably pretty close to 2 o'clock. So we've talked about a lot of stuff. Nobody fell asleep today, so I feel good about that. It's kind of like when I was in the Aggie band. As long as we all came off the field together, it was a successful drill, right? So when I'm presenting, as long as no one falls asleep, that's a good presentation. Anything y'all wanted to talk about that we didn't talk about today? It's that awkward silence. Yeah.
What is the biggest failure you had to overcome?
Whew. The biggest failure I've had to overcome. I think so. Biggest obstacle. I think part of it was like when I started the .com company. After 2 years, I had applied to a bunch of business schools. It was a little bit humbling. I applied to Harvard and Yale. I got into Rice and University of North Carolina, okay, which were two top 25. I really wanted to go to Yale or Harvard, and my undergrad was a 2.9, and I'm competing against people who had a lot better grades. So that was a little humbling. So I went back to the other company that I was with. So it was easy for a couple of years for me to look back on that .com period of time, which is almost exactly 2 years, and feel like it was a failure. But what I learned a lot about selling. I got very confident I could do cold calling. And before that, I didn't do that. I learned I could go out and build business. The main thing I learned through what I call that failure was I tried to do everything myself. So what I've done this time is I've surrounded myself with people. And I make a little bit less money, but I have a lot more fun. And my dad always said it's the area under the curve in calculus. So incrementally, I might not make as much money, but long term, if you build an organization that's 20, 30, $50 million, that's the goal. So I would say that failure I had, the company was called Guidon Incorporated and Guidon Inc. And that little, you can relate, because I was a Guidon bear in our outfit. And so only guys in the Corps know what that is. So that little short period of time, that 2 years that was kind of struggling and failing in a sense, I feel has really helped me today. So the other thing was I really wanted to be a fighter pilot, but my mother said that my ego was so bad that if I'd been a fighter pilot, they couldn't have stood me. So that was probably God. But I didn't have anything to do with that failure, so I don't think. So anyway, I'm glad we're able to do this. Andrew, I appreciate you kind of coordinated this. Roland, I'm really glad you're able to come. I didn't know you're going to be here today. Y'all are going to a good school. A&M has a good reputation around the country, really around the world. I was in Israel in 2005. They had a pipeline incident, got dented. And I'm not making this story up. So there's 12 people in the room, 12 engineers. Half of the people in the room are from Texas. So I'm on the other side of the world, 6 of 12 people from Texas. 3 of 12 were Aggies. So I look around the room, and 25% of us have Aggie rings. So anywhere in the world you go, certainly in the oil and gas industry, odds are you're going to run into somebody. So as I said, the fact that y'all are thinking about the business part, and to our live stream friends out there, that's a huge advantage. And I think we just need to do more and more of this stuff. So, well, thank y'all for coming out today. Thank you.